This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. It's the program ostensibly about sports that we started during the global sports shutdown. My name is Geoff Brault. Mike Wallace is our producer. The other man on the screen is Dr. Keith Strudler. He runs the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. Keith, we live in a world where in the last week, a women's soccer player is kicked in the SEC. The Denver Broncos played a game in the NFL without a quarterback. The San Francisco 49ers do not have a home. But the biggest sports story of the week comes from Allendale, New Jersey, your backyard, where there is considerable dispute over who won this year's Allendale 5K. Can you help us get to the bottom of this mess?
Yes, you couldn't resist. I told you this story maybe no more than 2 minutes ago, and you threw out the rundown, and you are leading. You are leading with an uncomfortable personal story.
When breaking news comes into my ear, it is my duty as a journalist to report it out to the people.
So I'll set the table for you. And I am hoping that no one in Allendale, particularly any of the people that were involved in this particular scenario, one of which was my wife, and we know she is not watching. So we've eliminated one person. So here's what happened. We're relatively new to town. I mean, we've been here for a couple of years, and obviously with COVID, it's very hard to meet people. And so we take any opportunity, obviously, to be social. And my wife went out with a couple of other women from town who are, nicely trying to socialize and bring new people into the community. And it's people with whom I think have a kid in the same grade as Ellie. So they're out and somehow, and they're socially distanced. It's an outdoor restaurant, safe as you can be, right? So I guess, and I've heard the story secondhand. And Andra, she has a strong personality. So she does not like to be told that she's wrong. I know this like every day. And so someone brought up the Allendale 5K, which is the local 5K that happens every year. Did not happen this year, but happens every other year. Now, someone, I guess one of the two other women at dinner, somehow for some reason brought up the Allendale 5K. Now, I have done the Allendale 5K the 2 years that I've lived here. I guess this is my third year living here. Those first 2 years, I did it both years, and not to brag, because it's not a very prestigious race. I did win, which, I'm not young. I'm way past my running prime. It's not a great time. I mean, this time, to be quite honest, would be a horrible high school time. It's nothing to be proud of, right? I mean, I think I won in like 18:11 last year. Big hill, rough course. So a little rainy, cool. And I drove back from Philly that morning. Get all that sandbagging out of the way. But I did win. So Andra said, when someone brought up this race, oh, my husband won that race. And unfortunately, the reply was, no, he didn't. Some kid won it. And now my wife's in a very uncomfortable situation. She's having to do the one thing she hates to do, which is defend her husband. But as you realize, this in no way was defending her husband. She does not like to be told she was wrong. And to be fair, she was against her own will at the race both times. She literally saw me finish first, right? I don't brag about this. It's just part of who I am, right? And there's a video online, like you can go to the Allendale 5K, whatever, and there's a video of me finishing first, right? And then kneeling over and almost throwing up, I suppose. So she's like, no, he won. And this woman was like, no, he didn't. This kid won. And she goes, okay. And the other person was like, well, maybe he won his age group. And she's like, okay, yeah, maybe he won his age group. Now understand, Andra was at the race. She saw me win the race. So now we have a situation where someone thinks Andra is loony, right? Right? She just makes up stuff about her husband. And I think more important to me, isn't acknowledging the fact that I am the two-time Allendale 5K champion. So Andra came home and told me this story. Now, obviously, she's more upset because, I don't want this to get in the way of me being able to cultivate friendships, and I don't like to be told that I'm wrong. I, on the other hand, am like, well, how are we gonna set the record straight? Like there are people walking around this town thinking that I'm not the champion. How are we going to deal with that? So I've presented a few opportunities for us to set the record straight, kind of casually in the middle of like a text, just be like, hey, look what I found online. Here's the page where it shows that my husband won. Another strategy, of course, is to use Facebook. To be like, hey, here's a great memory from a year ago. It's my husband winning the Allendale 5K. Andra has decided to drop it and let it go. I don't think that's a good decision. I think this is something we will come to regret. And now she's like, well, the only answer is next year you have to go out and win it again to prove that you are the champion. That's a lot of pressure for me to be carrying around. I'm an aging athlete. I don't know who's going to show up next year, right? You're only as good as, the competition, I suppose. So this is where we are. And it is a big problem. I don't know how to deal with it.
Well, there's an awful lot to unpack here. And I think it
Is
starts...
there really? Is there really?
Oh, there certainly is. And it starts with your team on the home front, because right now you and your wife are on the same team. She knows you won. You know you won. She's tried to tell others that you've won.
Yeah.
However, where it does seem that the team starts to fracture a bit is that she's willing to drop it for the sake of making new friends and the fact that it doesn't matter. Whereas you do not seem to share that viewpoint. So what I wonder is, will you be a good teammate and drop it? Or are you going to go guns blazing to make sure everybody in that town knows that you won and your wife's wishes be damned?
Well, I'm going to be fair. There are a lot of people that do seem to know that I won. I've walked by other people and they're like, oh, people at Sloan School know that I won. They're like, your dad won the 5K. Hey, look, there's Sloan's dad. He's the 5K champion. I don't know why this woman didn't get the memo. So it sounds like we need a third party involved. We need someone else to validate. We need to somehow get everyone in the room to be like, hey, there's kids. You still running? You look great in that 5K last year. We need something like that. Am I willing to drop it? I mean, I won. Like I won the race. I mean, so am I willing to? I don't know. But so the other problem, I mean, I think I need to convince Andra that it is in her best interest. What's worse? Well, let's look at it. What's worse? Does she look worse as someone that doesn't realize that her husband won his age group versus won the whole race? A, and that makes her look a little, off. Or B, as the person that sends out an obnoxious text to prove that she was right. And I know what you would do, by the way, right now. You would not have waited until you went to sleep that night to send out the text to validate that you were correct.
1,000%. Truth above all. So, but what it comes down to is, what bridges are you willing to burn? Yeah. And if you're willing to essentially make enemies of these people to prove that you did indeed win the Allendale 5K, you could do that and win the argument. You can be right. The proof is on your side. The truth shall set everyone free. But the problem is you will never go for a nice walk in the park with those people again. You will be social pariahs. So that's why this is such a difficult thing to figure out, is because it's are you willing to die on the hill of everyone in town knowing you won the Allendale 5K, or would you like to be well-liked members of society? Because it does not seem as though you can have both.
How about this? I'm going to go real meta on this. How about if Andra sends out a link next week and be like, hey, I don't know, my husband does this sports show. I thought you guys might like it.
So I like that, because that is a chance to quadruple our viewership. So I would be a big fan if we could get 4 more viewers in here. I feel like that's really going to do great things for us in the ratings. I do think, however, there is a small window of daylight that you have where Andra can both save face and not have to make a stand and rub the wrong way these people she's trying to be friends with, and a way that I think you can get your due as the winner of the Allendale 5K.
Continue.
You need to set up I don't know how many people it was, like a double date or just a group outing with spouses involved, right?
Mm-hmm. All right.
And whatever it is you're doing, and granted, in this current time, it can't be much. So let's say you're going for a socially distanced sit in the local park.
Okay.
You have to show up to that wearing your champion's medal. Never mention it. Never mention it. Don't bring it up in the slightest. If anyone asks you what it is, just say it's an old family heirloom. But you have to make sure that you put the goods on display so that everyone can see it.
It's a lot of work to make this happen. But I do think it's worth it. I do think it's worth it. The proof's in the pudding. right? I mean, if I show up, the one thing they won't be able to say about me if I show up with that medal is that I'm not the Allendale champion. They're going to be able to say a lot of other things when I leave the premises. Most of them will not be good, but they will not be able to say that I'm not the champion. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. I'll work on it. But anyway, so that's the sport. That is the big sports news here. That and the fact that I believe they're shutting down all indoor sports here and all across the rest of New Jersey, which is going to make for a very uncomfortable next several weeks and potentially months here in the Strudler household, where we found that indoor basketball is not a particularly viable game.
Well, don't tell that to the NCAA, because they are full steam ahead on their college basketball season. And right now it's
they're not playing in my basement, though. They're not playing.
Not yet. Not yet. When South Dakota gets overrun, who knows where they're going to go?
That's true.
So we're here on the evening of Monday, November 30th, the last day before the last month of 2020, one of the craziest years possibly
Ever.
of all time. As of right now, give or take, 14% of NCAA Division I men's basketball programs are on pause, and give or take about that number of games have been canceled or postponed. I go back and forth on whether or not that's positive, negative, or just somewhere in the middle as to be expected. But college basketball season has begun, and the vast majority of games are being played by the vast majority of teams.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where we are right now, of course. We'll see where we are a week from now and a month from now, and certainly 2 or 3 months from now, when there are plans to play a very unusual NCAA tournament that could have anywhere from 16 to 64 teams, depending on, by the way, I love bracketology that now has 4 different versions that you can choose from.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot. And can we also be clear? I will not accept a college basketball national champion that was won without the potential influence of an Ivy League team vying for the title. I refuse to accept. Trump may not accept the results of the election. I will not accept the results of this college basketball season when the Cornell Big Red did not have the opportunity to vie for. How can anyone call themselves a champion when they didn't have to march through Ithaca, New York on the way to that title? So let's set that stage. But look, right now, as it stands today, first off, could you have predicted a world where Gonzaga's 1, Creighton's 9, Iowa's 3, and North Carolina's somewhere in the mid-teens and Kentucky's 20? I mean, it's a weird world we live in.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. None of those programs you mentioned aren't perennially ranked. Those are all very, very good schools.
Iowa 3, Kentucky 20? Come on.
I think arguably the best player in America right now.
I think the perennial strength of Gonzaga. Now we're doing a sports show all of a sudden. The perennial strength of Gonzaga is one of. I know you love the Butler story, twice in the national championship. Mm-hmm. I think that Gonzaga's perennial strength over the course of now decades is one of the most remarkable stories in the history of college sports. I just think what they've done from a small conference with very limited resources. It's not a big school. I know they have resources now.
That limited resources part's not exactly correct. No one in the college basketball circle considers Gonzaga mid-major. I understand the conference that they play in, but they do not succeed in spite of that. That just happens to be the conference they play in. Like when the UConn women were in the AAC, like nobody considers them a team on that level. But it's the same thing with Gonzaga. They invest in their program as much as anybody in the country. As much as anybody in the country, they invest in their basketball program.
They don't. Mark Few doesn't get paid near anything.
Mark Few gets paid enough to still be the coach at Gonzaga, which means Mark Few gets paid plenty.
He'd get paid 2 to 3 times as much if he were the coach at North Carolina.
I don't know if it'd be that much.
What does Cal make? 9?
I don't know.
20?
No,
100?
No.
But I think he's like 8.
Nick Saban doesn't make 9.
No, I think now we're just talking. There's this thing called the internet.
Right. We could find these answers out. But Gonzaga is, what they've accomplished being a school in Tacoma, Washington is remarkable, but let's not act like
they're a school in Tacoma, Washington. They're a small school in Tacoma, Washington that does not have a massive endowment, that does not have Division I football money, does not have massive television dollars in the same way that does not have the Big 12 TV money, does not have Big 10 network TV money. I mean, it's a great story.
Yes, but let's not pretend like here in the year 2020 they are underdogs.
Let me put it this way: when Mark Few goes away, Gonzaga, I don't think continues to be Gonzaga over a period of time. Gonzaga will recede to the pack. When that to me is the test. It's the coach that made them what they are. It's
recede
not, you know,
to which pack? Recede to the pack of the mid to lower top 25, or recede to the pack of they're going to start finishing 6th in the West Coast Conference?
Somewhere in between those two. Somewhere in between those two.
I don't know. I think at this point there's equity there. I don't know. I'd be very interested to see how that.
I just don't think there's the critical there. There's something that will keep Kentucky. Like, this is what I always thought about Texas athletics. When Texas football wasn't good, I was like, what is going on? Like, how can you not be good when you're the University of Texas football program, right?
You mean like the last 15 years?
It defies logic when you are the signature wealthiest school in the land. You have the biggest athletic department in the country, and you are square set in the center of the richest recruiting base in the country. Yeah. How are you losing to Oklahoma?
Well,
Houston, how are you losing to Houston? Like, I mean, you're losing to everybody. How does that happen?
If we've learned anything in this year, it's that leadership matters. Leadership matters far more than resources, matters far more than prestige. It matters far more than anything. Like, who your leader is and the culture that they create, because that is the number one thing that they do, especially in college athletics, matters significantly.
Yeah. And money matters too.
Oh, it does. But to your point, Texas has all of that and more. There is no better funded athletic department in America than the Texas Longhorns.
Yes.
And they have not been able to get it done.
Sure, absolutely. And you can see,
at least in football. And I will say something that did surprise me. It surprised me that Shaka Smart did not have success there. I'm very surprised about that.
I think all of us assumed when he went to Texas, because Texas is an unheralded or underrated high school basketball recruiting area. A lot of great athletes coming out of Texas, and you can recruit nationally, obviously. And they have their own network, right? And so there's everything that seems. And by the way, look, no offense to the Aggies out there, when you visit A&M and then you go visit College Station, then you go to Austin, I don't know how anyone like A&M. That was Gonzaga's my number one story. Texas A&M being better than Texas every year. Someone explain that to me. I grew up in Texas. I just don't understand it. You're like, look, you can come to school here. A lot of cows. We have a bonfire. Not anymore. That's what it is. And you're going to have to study veterinary science or engineering. Those are your only two options. Or you can go to the greatest city in America.
And Austin is a great city. And that exact point, as someone who's traveled to, probably over 100 some odd college campuses over the last decade plus, you step on some of these campuses in some of these towns, and the first thing that you think as you look around is not like, how could they get someone to come here to play football or basketball? It's how could they get someone to come here? You just like, who is getting off the bus, looking around and going, oh yeah, this is for me. It is constantly amazing to me that some extraordinarily successful athletics programs are located in miserable areas. That's
when you realize, A, some of these coaches are incredible recruiters and incredible salespeople, and B, there's a lot of cheating going on.
There must be. Because you know what else I can never understand? Why is Pepperdine not great? Who doesn't want to go to Pepperdine?
Yeah, there's a pretty heavy religious code that comes along with that.
Yeah, but if you see the views.
Yeah. And sure, the big religious code that comes with BYU, but BYU has something. BYU's got a thing. And BYU, by the way, that's a bucket list stadium for me. Football game at BYU is a bucket list.
Really?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely, first of all, great. I mean, it is a great football environment. The fans are not liquored up, but very fervent. But it's just a great spectacle. But you know what?
Clearly I don't think that matters, because look at Liberty. Look at Liberty right now.
What had someone explained to me, first of all, their coach, forget his name, Freeze, right? Hugh Freeze. An interesting story, to say the least.
Short, let's say a tale of redemption.
So I have look. I'm not a big fan of the Flames. I can't say that I'm a huge fan of the programs. A little too dogmatic for my liking as a university.
Sure. I mean, they do make BYU look like animals.
I hope I'm not burning any bridges. I hope I wasn't up for a big job there. But I have a feeling my membership in the tribe from which I came might be disqualified. Could easily make it difficult for me to really climb the rank. It'd be tough for me to be president of Liberty. I just feel like that's a bridge too far for everyone there. And I don't cavort with pool boys. So So, 2 strikes against me.
But that could be a chicken and egg situation. Maybe you don't cahoot with pool boys because you aren't the president of Liberty.
But maybe that part of comes with the. So, but the Hugh Freeze situations is bizarre to me. He left his last job because things were crumbling. Clearly a brilliant coach and great recruiter. Things were crumbling, and by the way, it was a Houston nut. The story of how Hugh Freeze lost his job, because you want to talk about someone believing that revenge is a dish best served cold. The Houston Nutt story has to be one of your favorite, where Houston Nutt was so mad about getting fired that he basically waited for years and years and years, and then went after the university and said, how about this guy? And they were able to get the phone records from Hugh Freeze, and they weren't even looking for it. Remember, it was like a public records, and it turns out they're like, oh, by the way, this coach here, he's calling escort services on his work phone.
His work phone. Yeah.
Who does that? Yeah. Who does that?
Again, just
but
get a burner. Just go to Walmart and pick up a track phone.
You don't even need a burner. You just need a personal phone. You actually don't need
but even that's connected to your name. That could be found out. Yes, not as easily as a FOIA request, but just get a burner.
Yeah. This is what I have a hard time with Liberty. How does Liberty then say, you know what, this is the guy we're going after? Like, I understand when a school like Florida, Texas, UNC, like, they hire whoever they want. They've never made claims to the sanctity. Like, they never imagined that they're answering to a higher power. Like, Jesus was never an assistant coach on the Gators, right? That's as far as I know. Maybe Jesus Shuttleworth, but I haven't, I don't understand how that works. And then so they hire a coach with clearly some demons in the closet. How does Liberty get so good? And how does a team like Liberty, and I understand that, I guess maybe it's because it comes back to it, you get leadership, someone who's a really good coach, and they have probably far more resource than we could ever imagine. They have somewhere around 750,000 students. And they just, I guess you can buy your way into some pretty good situations at that point, right?
You can buy your way pretty far. And as Liberty will learn, you can buy your way into the second tier. You cannot buy your way into the top tier, especially in college football. The top tier is pretty well reserved, as evidenced by the fact that the same 3 teams make the college football playoff every year. And then there's one rotating spot for the next 5 teams. The one place I will give them credit is they have hit on a lot of diamond in the rough type guys. They've successfully found those players that the blue chips would overlook, but that have a lot of talent. And those players have gone to Liberty and found success there on the athletic field. The other thing they've done is exactly what you said. They've thrown an awful lot of money at the problem, and they've bought their way pretty far forward.
Yeah. And, at some point, I mean, you've talked to a lot of college football players. The things that you think wouldn't be important sometimes are, like, look at those helmets, look at those locker rooms. Like, right. You're going to have a special study hall where you have your own desk and it's going to have your name on it. And like, things that you would assume at that point an athlete would be making a decision that's a little bit more kind of focused on my NFL prospects, the right education. It literally is like that helmet. Like, those NC State helmets are awesome. I wonder if that's going to win them a couple of recruits.
I truly believe this. I believe there is a 1 and 1A in why college football players specifically choose where they go to college. One is they want to be a college football player at whatever level. They want to be a FCS college football player. They want to be a top 5 college football, whatever. They want to be that. And number 2, equally as important, they want to look like that. What they look like on Instagram matters to them. It matters that they get shots of them in different uniforms every week. It matters that they have the players lounge with the barber shop in it. It matters that they have the slide from the top of their facility to the bottom and that they all walk around with all the best gear. Like, that truly matters. And I think there's a lot of older people who don't believe I can't believe someone would pick a school based on the kind of cleats they get. Oh yeah. Oh, no. There are people picking schools based on the kind of shoes they get.
Oh, I can tell you. I mean, as at a much, much lower level, I can remember the first time I got free Nikes from Cornell. I was like, I got free Nikes from Cornell. This is not so bad. And it really like just the idea, like we've got a Nike coach now. We have a Nike coach. Like those things, they absolutely matter. Oregon has made it very clear that those things matter. Which also, look, as because this show is going to continue to route through the Ivy Leagues, even though they're not playing probably ever again. The Ivy League is never going to play sports again. They had a very good run. It started literally hundreds of years ago. It was a great run. They've won a lot of championships. It is just too dangerous. It is just too dangerous. But I always wondered, like, why couldn't, and they do get a lot of good athletes, why the Ivies couldn't pull even more significant weight where you could say, hey, look, you come here, you're not going to have to end up, you'll get grants and so forth that you're basically going to get a free education and you are going to potentially be a CEO and, a senator after you leave here. Look at Bill Bradley, look at that. And I always wondered why they weren't getting legitimate Division I kind of prospects playing there. And I think in the end of the day, you go visit the Dartmouth locker room and it's pretty disappointing. And you start to realize like, oh, I'm playing Ivy League football. And that's what this, like, I don't care that Jack Ford's going to be on the sideline at the Harvard deal.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I don't care that like all those CEOs sitting in the stands that are going to be waiting in line to hire me once I graduate, not those uniforms. Like, have you seen the Ivy League uniforms? They suck. They're
single
ugly.
color, some single color. Most of the schools in the league are named after a color.
The brown uniforms, it's almost intentionally bad. It's almost like they went to Burger King and they're like, let me see what you guys are suiting up. All right, we're going to follow that motif, but we're going to make it look really old. And that's what we're sticking with.
Again, all of these colleges are not building these facilities for no reason. If they didn't work, no one would have done it after the first one. Heck, let's look at Vanderbilt. This is a great transition into talking about Sarah Fuller. Let's look at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a program in the SEC that doesn't have that stuff. And they are right now in the middle of a campaign to drop like $50 million on a football facility. So, look, Vanderbilt is a sub-Ivy institution.
I wouldn't say, look, to be fair, it's not sub. It is. Yeah. It is Vanderbilt's academic ascent over the last 25, 30 years is nothing short of remarkable. It is an elite institution. They have some of the finest professionals in the country and in, as you like to say, a world-class city.
World-class city.
I think there are a lot of kids that are choosing. It used to be years ago, no offense to anyone who has gone or went to Vandy. Vandy used to be kind of the second from Duke, right? Kind of like Cornell was the second from every other school in the Ivies. So the Vandy is not anyone's little cousin. Like Vandy is one of the most coveted university spots in the country now.
By the way, that sound you hear is all of the whiffin' poofs from Yale sighing loudly at the fact that you called Cornell second in the Ivy.
No, we're second to all in the Ivy. I get it. Okay. Let me put it this way. We are literally, brother. I think Cornell's the greatest. It's the greatest university in the country. Any person find any study in any something or whatever.
You and Andy Bernard.
Yeah. But almost everyone who's in another Ivy considered Cornell their safety school. I know that because that's what they would yell every time we would play them.
Also, subtle dig at Brown there with almost everyone in the Ivy League.
They're our brethren. They're kind of we're a lot more hippie, or all of us. We're just a little bit more.
Yeah, but at least your courses are pass fail. At least you give out actual grades.
Well, I wish they were pass fail because last time I checked, a D is still passing.
C's get degrees. All right. I want to talk about Vanderbilt kicker Sarah Fuller. The biggest story in sports probably of this entire year. We don't need to rehash it. Essentially, Vanderbilt had a COVID outbreak. They needed a kicker. And the best one that they could find on campus was their women's soccer goalie. So Sarah Fuller became the first woman to ever play in a Power 5 game when she began the second half with a squib kick. What is it, Keith, about us as a society? Because as soon as this happened, the misogyny just flowed over on Twitter, and just people were coming out of the woodworks with their knowledge of Vanderbilt's kickoff schemes and the fact that she, is inadequate and that it's a publicity stunt and all of these things, none of which I believe is true. But this is the same thing that seems to happen anytime any woman gets any kind of renown in sports, whether it's individual or a team, right? Because what happens every time, say, the women's soccer team wins the World Cup, they go, well, I know a high school team in Dallas that would beat them. Like, it's the first thing that happens every time any woman does anything notable in sports and gets major national attention. Why is that still happening here in 2020?
By the way, I want to, the high school football, I think that the 49ers should move to a high school stadium in Texas. I just want to get that take out of the way. They're the only ones I firmly, they should be in Allen, Texas right now. Beautiful stadium. So look, I think anytime a woman takes a prominent spot, particularly one that was kind of owned by a man, there is the challenge to the male ego in some cases. They are taking this away from me. The patriarchy of sports, we own that, and how dare a woman come into that space and take that away? So they will, some people will throw any critique they can to kind of establish their kind of assumed superiority and ownership of this space of sports, right? Men historically have felt as if they own football. And so how dare a woman come in and try to take that spot from us? And they're kind of nonsensical arguments. How could she know the game? She wasn't raised on football. We're talking about kicking a ball. It's, it is, I mean, we're talking about kicking a ball. There are a lot of bad kickers in college football. Like, you don't have to go far to find bad kickers in college football. There are teams that go for 2 on almost every play because they do not trust their kicker. And at the Division I level, they do not trust their kicker to make an extra point.
And I mean, to that point, Vanderbilt asked her to be on the team. This wasn't some campaign that she ran to be the first woman to kick off in a Power 5 game. And also, by the way, their special teams coach came out and said that they auditioned a number of players on their roster that claimed they played soccer in high school or they had kicked before, and then still decided to ask their women's soccer goalie to kick for them. So this is not, that I truly don't understand that argument.
No, and everyone thinks they can kick, right? And so, so I think I'd much rather have soccer goalies have big legs. I'd much rather have someone who comes from that world. There's so in some ways, look, this is a notable accomplishment. I think everyone should be happy about it. I think it does, present a great role model for women that want to pursue other sporting opportunities. The only thing I think confounds this, and I think sometimes we go down the wrong track. So what you hear, and you heard a lot of the misogyny, I actually heard a lot of the other, which is this kind of self-congratulatory tone. We have a woman playing football,
That's
right?
True.
Look at this. Women can do anything and they're playing football. Well, the reality is this. Women are not going to be playing, in most positions, major Division I football, nor would that make a lot of sense, right? And in some ways, this becomes kind of a red herring, right? To me, the question isn't, well, can we have women playing in men's Division I college football? I mean, is that, it's not really, and well, anyone can do anything they put their mind to. Well, that's not true. Just because, look, I couldn't have played men's Division I college football either, because I was a 150-pound runner who would get killed on the first play, right? So I in some ways, the conversation, I'd like to see the conversation move from, look, we can have a woman playing in football. Now, if it takes some of the patriarchy away from football, this idea that men own football, women can be just as involved with the game. I think the question should return to what it should be. And hopefully this is the pivot, which is not how many more female kickers can we have in a men's game, but rather, all right, why aren't women allowed to play football in the first place? Why is there not a women's football league? If this is a space that should be open to men and women, why haven't would be able to create that at the youth level, when you have, before men and women are often divided in their sports, why aren't girls and boys, but why are girls being, sent away to no offense to cheerleading practice, but why are they being offered cheerleading when men are being offered football? And what we really, why isn't there more resource? And there is, so this is unfair, continued to be put towards women's sports in college. And I think those are the questions I'd like to see addressed. Look, this is an obvious kind of display of a woman who was a very strong athlete who was given an opportunity to do something that was groundbreaking. But I don't want us to say, oh, this is an end unto itself. Let's see if we can have more women, because that's just not that's not really what this should be about.
So I hear your point, and I agree with your point, but where I don't so much have a problem with, the folks that really were hyping up this accomplishment, maybe more so than it deserved to be hyped up, is because I took it more as, hey, when a woman does something great in sport, it's okay to celebrate them the same way you celebrate a man doing something great in sport. I didn't hear a whole lot of, and I guess there was some of this now that I think back on it, people that are like, oh, now my daughter thinks she too can play SEC football. Probably not the sentiment that we need out there. But what I do hope this can move us closer toward is there are still far, far too many people who claim to be sports fans who will say things like, well, I'd never watch the WNBA because they can't dunk or they don't run as fast. I'm like, if you only watch, like, women's sports are great for the same reason men's sports are great. It's about storylines and it's about interesting, and sort of that struggle. Like, if you'd rather watch a 40-point blowout in the NBA over a 1-point game in the WNBA, you're kind of telling on yourself a little bit. Like, and also track and field would be a lot more popular if you only wanted to watch the fastest and those that could jump the highest. So to me, like, I hope this gets us a little closer to spotlighting cool stories that just happen to feature women in sports, as opposed to only making it interesting when it's a man's sports story and putting that on the front page.
I think they look, and I think that's particularly true for women's team sports. I mean, there are certainly many famous individual sport female athletes. Of course, Serena Williams being the most prominent. And I just wanted to say that so I could get a plug in for our favorite mockumentary, 7 Days in Hell, which I watched
5 years late to the party, Keith Strudler.
That's not, remember when I was like, hey, does anyone know this? Does anyone know this Twitter account, Faux Pellini? It's so funny.
You are nothing if not timely 5 years later in seeing 7 Days in Hell.
That movie is so good. That movie is so good. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
now streaming on all your platforms and available on VHS.
You went back and rewatched it, didn't you?
I did, because you kept talking about it and I remember none of the intricate details.
It is. What's your favorite scene in that movie?
I don't know if any of them are appropriate to talk about.
No, well, look, I can say a couple ones. When he kicks his way out of prison, and the line is, and by Swedish law, he is now a free man. Or, if you're choosing to get a wig, why would you get that wig?
I was a big fan of when Serena Williams called adopting Andy Samberg's character a reverse blindside.
Right. Yep. I mean, it's all... Why didn't they look at the guy who went to school to drive a truck? I mean, look, John McEnroe is one of those actors that can only play one role, and that one role is himself. But he does that very well. It's the Jerry Seinfeld school of acting. You can only play one role, but you can play that role very well. So anyway, I wanted to get that plug in for that movie since we were talking about Serena Williams. Look. Yes, I again, it's the same conversation. This is a reminder that we should be continuing to resource and prioritize women's athletics. And yes, there are a lot of people give a lot of reasons for why they don't watch women's sports. Look, no one has to watch anything, so people can watch what they want to watch, and you know that's the way it is. Some of the reasons, though, and this has never been a great excuse, they're not as good. Again, by that account, you'd never watch college football. I love college football is not as good as the pros. They're just not as good. Right. And so as we found out when a Wake Forest quarterback, who was a pretty good college quarterback, had to fill in for the Rams, right?
The Broncos.
The Broncos, excuse me. Fill in for the Broncos and look like a 5-year-old. Like, I mean, that's the delta between college athletics.
Literally able to complete one pass. Completed one pass. And this is an NFL caliber athlete.
So are we moving on to this story? I felt like I made a pretty good segue there.
Yeah, I think you did a fine job of it. So because of coronavirus, the Broncos didn't have a single eligible quarterback.
By the way, is anyone more self-aware in their show than us? When we do something well, we kind of congratulate.
Well, no. We don't do that. One of us does that, but we don't do that as a collective. Like some of them have the self-control not to bring up the 5-year-old mockumentary and then spend 2 minutes telling the inside jokes that no one understands or remembers.
Well, look, let's say our audience is X, and that X is not as big as we'd like it to be, and the subset is Y. That have the delta. There's two circles: people who have watched 7 Years in Hell, and then people who watch Sportish. There's that little crossover. You're welcome. You are welcome. By the way, I'm going to go on a limb here. I think most of our viewers have watched 7 Days in Hell.
Oh, I absolutely think most of our viewers have watched it in 2015. So the Broncos didn't have a quarterback. And the reason they didn't have a quarterback is because it was determined after their backup, Jeff Driscoll, tested positive for coronavirus, that the rest of the quarterbacks were in a film session with him and weren't wearing masks at the time. So they were all ruled ineligible for the game against the Saints. And a lot of people are saying, well, why wasn't the game pushed back? And the reason the game wasn't pushed back is because the NFL found that they acted irresponsibly. So they're, in effect, they penalized the Broncos. Yeah. Right. They said, your people did not follow the rules, therefore figure it out. They also, by the way, weren't allowed to sign another quarterback because of the rules that are in place about being able to bring people into your program a certain amount of time before a game. Sure. And they also, Keith, did not do something that we talked about on this program as being a very intelligent thing to do. They didn't have a quarantine quarterback. They did not have a fourth quarterback.
It sounded ridiculous
in case of calamity.
And now who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? It sounded ridiculous. And it's what's our guy down in Texas?
Josh McCown.
My bromance guy. He's down. Josh McCown's down in Texas, just waiting. If the Broncos had taken that same move, he would have been driving himself up in his new Bronco, getting himself up there. See, I said Bronco to a Bronco.
I picked up what you were putting down. You didn't need to explain it. The people that are going to get the joke are going to get it.
I should have said pickup truck. I should have said like Ford F-150. That would have been better. Then I wouldn't have had to try to show that I did that on purpose. So he would be driving up there with his rugged good looks and his perfectly tailored suit, and he'd go right in that locker room and he'd lead them to a victory. Now what you got is a guy who played 3 years of quarterback at Wake Forest, and
by the way, didn't play 3 years of quarterback at Wake Forest. Like, was on the roster at Wake Forest, played like 6 games at quarterback, started 1, and had a season-ending injury.
So how does this conversation go? Coach brings everyone, guys, I just need a show of hands. Who here at any level, at any time, has played quarterback? Just show of hands. Like,
I understand you're making a joke. That's actually probably how it went.
Yep.
Like, conversation 1 was, we got to figure out, do we have anybody that can throw the football? And then conversation 2 is, do we have anybody that can run the Wildcat? And the answer, by the way, to both of those questions was no, we don't.
So, and they bring a guy, but how I read, what was the quarterback's name again? The Wake Forest guy? What was the quarterback? Kendall Hinton. I read a couple of quotes from him, and he's a practice squad guy. He's a practice squad.
Yeah. So he made $35,000 to start an NFL game at quarterback.
So he's literally like, well, I'm a practice squad guy. Maybe I'll stick in the league. Maybe I got a Wake Forest degree. Maybe I'll go out, it's a good school. I'll go out and get a job, whatever it is. All of a sudden he goes not only from, I got called up to play in an NFL game. I'm playing quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like, think about that phone call. Be like, hey, Hinton, we got some COVID protocol issues. We're going to have to bring you up, to fill out our roster. Coach, that's great. I'm in. Whatever you want. What am I playing? Am I special teams? You'll be playing quarterback. I'm gonna text you the playbook. We're gonna simplify a little bit. We're gonna have 2 plays.
Yeah, they about did. Yeah. Well, I guess it's 4 because you can run them both ways.
We're gonna do handoffs and we're gonna do throws. Are you familiar with those two plays? I mean, that's what we're dealing with. I will also say, and I know we don't have that much time left, but we talked during the week about the challenges right now and the incredible ambiguity with scheduling. And this is to kind of go full circle. In college basketball, it's like, well, Baylor was going to go play them. Now they're just going to play someone else.
It's the 48-hour rule in college basketball. I literally said to someone when there was talk of possibly a game in which I would have to broadcast, I was like, I need 24 hours notice. Like, I need 24 hours. If it happens, I need 24 hours.
So they're making up these schedules as they go, right? Because that's what they have to do. So you can't go here. Well, who like, you almost feel like there's going to be like a Craigslist developed for this. Like, who needs a game?
It's on Twitter. Louisville women's basketball coach Jeff Walz twice now has put out a public call for teams. And what happens when you do that is you find there are a lot of very game D2 programs that would love to play you on national television.
Watch what you wish for, and all of a sudden you become everyone's biggest game of the year. That's the last thing you need. Is when your easy game against like Dayton or something like that. Or not, Dayton's a bad example actually, but when your kind of pushover game against some NEC team has been canceled, and now all of a sudden you have a really hungry D2 program that is ready to run through a brick wall to beat you. Like, that's the last thing you need. As someone who has been part of a track program across that once lost to a Division III school, that will be. I mean, the bus ride home was miserable. Hearing that was the biggest win of their year, and so, but the thing that I find amazing is, coaches, they game plan out for weeks and months. Yeah. We pay all these services, and we've got a practice squad that they're going to mimic what the other team does for the whole week. And you're going to watch this guy on television. Now, all of a sudden it's like, who are we playing today, coach? Like, what are they running? Like, do they run a motion? How does this work? It's amazing how much they've had to adjust on the fly.
But that just kind of underscores why this year, no one's taking it very seriously. Everybody's like, we're just going to roll it out there and we're going to play. And, some good teams will develop and we'll find out, all right, these 5 teams are probably pretty good and there might be a fair national champion or whatever, but it's not going to mean what it's meant before. A lot of that, this is what we have to do to prepare for a game. That's sort of fallen away, and coaches this year are just kind of like, we're going to roll the balls out and play.
Yeah. I mean, I think there will be some delineation between basketball and football. I think in football, look, I think the teams are still planning on playing this out to its conclusion. I think the teams are taking it very seriously. And I think, look, if you go down to Gainesville, if the Gators win a national title, they are going to take that really seriously, particularly if they beat Alabama to get there.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, they're so much further down the line. I mean, at this point, it's the SEC, Clemson, and Notre Dame. I mean, Ohio State might not even get into the Big Ten championship if they get one more game canceled.
Particularly, and I think Michigan will finally find a way to ruin Ohio State's season by upping their COVID counts. So if you see a bunch of very large men out and about in Ann Arbor without masks on, I think we know the fix is in.
All right, that's all the time we got for this episode of Sports. Just a reminder, if you're enjoying us on For the Fans, you can go back and watch old episodes. See if we were right or wrong about what's going to happen in the world at ftfnext.com. And podcast versions are always available wherever your favorite podcasts are heard. Got to thank Mike Wallace, who is our producer. And of course,
we don't have to. We will thank Michael Wallace. We don't have to.
I mean, I guess we don't have, but it's nice. It's nice to, and we're entering the season of giving. Why not give some extra thanks instead of taking credit away from a guy who spends minutes of work a week on this program?
Good job, Mike. Interesting fact today, as we record this, I have not taken a shower yet today, but I did get in the swimming pool.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. He's Keith. I'm Jeff. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.